Welcome to the Law Firm Lab by MB Law Firm Consulting.
Welcome to the Law Firm Lab by MB Law Firm Consulting, the show where we explore how law firms grow smarter, scale sustainably, and lead with clarity. So I'm Margaret Burke, and today I'm joined by my colleague and co-host, Lauren Johnson. Lauren is a consultant here at MB Law Firm Consulting. And together we're excited to welcome our guest, Jennifer Gillman. Jennifer is the president of Gillman Strategic Group. Jennifer is a former lawyer turned legal recruiter who helps law firm partners with their books of business. She helps law firm partners take control of their careers because successful lawyers deserve to be happy also. So through her work at Gillman Strategic Group, she helps lawyers find the right cultural fit so that they can build sustainable practices and focus on what matters most and actually enjoy their careers. So in this episode, we'll explore how small to mid-sized law firms can compete with larger law firms for top talent. We'll talk about the importance of work-life balance, the benefits of early business development in an attorney's career, and Jennifer's framework, the 6 pillars to becoming a happy rainmaker. So Jennifer, welcome to the Law Firm Lab.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you with us today. So we always start every episode with a question. If you could please share with us, what is the worst piece of advice you have ever received?
The worst piece of advice I've ever received was when I was a first-year associate at a law firm, and they said, keep your head down, do the work. The partners you work with are your clients. Don't worry about developing business. As you become more experienced, the business will just find you. That's like telling your single friend who'd like to meet someone that if she stays home watching Netflix and ordering takeout, her dream person is going to find her. They didn't know I was there.
Yeah, that's not good advice. Thank you for sharing that. So we'll jump in. So we have some questions for you, Jennifer. Please, feel free to, give any additional feedback as we go into another direction. This is very free flowing, and Lauren, you can jump in.
Okay, excellent. So Jen, let's kick things off on a question about recruiting and how small and mid-sized firms can compete, because a lot of times they are trying to compete with big firms for talent. And so when that occurs, where do you see the biggest advantages that the small and mid-sized firms have over the larger firms when competing for talent?
I think the biggest advantage that the small and mid-sized firms have is that they can offer a career, not just a job. A lot of these very large firms, they hire 100 first-year associates and they churn through them. And it's like playing Hunger Games. And at, 10 years out, 1 or 2 of them make partner and the rest of them have burned out, left law entirely, gone in a different direction with their legal career, or found one of these small and mid-sized firms that actually offers them a real career. So I think that, the small and mid-sized law firms, except for a couple of boutiques out there, aren't able to compete on price, right? So they can't offer $225 for first years, but what they can offer is a way forward, a way to actually develop a skill set that they can use in their career, a way to begin developing their own brand and their own business and their own clients. And actually the money does catch up. If you become a rainmaker at a smaller mid-sized firm, at some point, it's very possible to make more money than you would have in a service position at a larger firm. So, unfortunately, they really can't capture those few people who have a particular reason that they have to pay their loans back really fast, or they need money for a mortgage or for, to support a family or something like that. But for the vast majority of candidates coming out of law school, they probably do care about developing their skills and becoming a good lawyer and being able to manage their own career and not burn out on 3,000 hours a year.
Excellent. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? It's really talking about, you know, the talent that you're recruiting and what you can really offer. And while you may not be able to match the salary right away, there are a lot of options that small and mid-sized firms can offer that I think are really appealing to a lot of people that are looking for jobs. It's just a matter of really positioning the firms that way and not shying away from, hey, we've got a lot that we can offer you. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, I think when I was still in law school, the smaller firms were talking about, more hands-on experience at an earlier point in your career. But a lot of them were saying that they wanted to see lawyers who had been at large firms and had received training first, and then they would hire them. I think the real advantage is in finding those candidates right out of school who don't want to spend years on document review or due diligence or on teams with 10 different layers in them where they don't get to speak to the client or take the deposition or argue the motion, but a place where you can offer them some real skills development and leaner teams so they do more exciting work.
Yeah, Jennifer, thank you. I'm curious, you mentioned the past with firms. Have you found that within the last, let's say, 10 years, there is any change in what attorneys leaving law school are expecting from the firms they join?
Well, I have to say that I can only speak anecdotally. I can only talk about the candidates that I meet and the lawyers that I'm speaking with, but it doesn't sound like law schools are doing a great job talking about business development even now. It really feels like they're talking about just, being great at proofreading, making sure you're responsive, making sure you do your best effort and your best job and put in lots of hours. And they're missing out. I mean, I went to law school with a class of 400 people who became very successful in a lot of different ways. If I had known that it was very important to keep in touch with all of them and to build on those relationships we had already created, I may have been a little bit ahead of the game. If they had talked about maybe keeping in touch with the people I went to high school with and the people I went to college with and developing relationships with those lower down people, the more junior people at the client who were at my level, and making sure that I was responsive to them and I was friendly, maybe they would have moved other places. I mean, there's a lot of natural business development that can be done that doesn't really feel forced and is very pleasant to people who, especially, I liked people. If somebody had told me how to direct that energy, I
Right.
probably could have developed business at an earlier stage.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
when I
interesting.
was in law school, the best advice they gave me that was sort of think forward, it had nothing to do with networking and business development. It basically was like, don't make a fool of yourself while you're in law school because the person that, is watching you, if you're inebriated or something like that, could be a judge that you come up against later on in your career or something like that. But that was the extent of it, right? Nothing about building relationships, networking. These are really your peers. You want to start laying that foundation now. It's just not a part of the curriculum.
Yeah, and I think some law schools are trying a little bit, but it just needs to improve a lot more. And I only work with Rainmaker partners at our company, but I do hear anecdotally from my partner candidates that a lot of the newer associates that are coming out of school are interested in different things than they used to be. They just can't figure out why they don't want to work 3,000 hours on document review a year and have every weekend ruined and reschedule their honeymoon in order to have a very small chance at making partner down the road. And they seem confused about how the newer associates are kind of looking for more work-life balance earlier on, which I think is a good sign, not a bad sign.
Yeah. I think it's a great sign. It's very sustainable for the legal industry. I don't think that folks can continue to be expected to work as many hours as maybe expected now with some firms and definitely in the past and be healthy mentally and physically to provide good service. So we also wanted to talk about, so you, Jennifer, you often emphasize sustainable careers. What does that look like in practice for associates and partners?
Sure. So we talk about sustainable careers because, unfortunately, in the legal industry, there's a history of mental and physical challenges, burnout. There are problem drinking and drug issues. Law firms have high suicide rates that we don't talk about very often, but are still happening in the background. Lawyers are admitting to a lot of anxiety and depression. And even the ones who escape from having those mental health challenges often have physical health challenges. We read terrible stories about 47-year-olds who have fatal heart attacks in the office in front of everyone. And people just forget about it. And I think that it's tied to the expectations that we have. You know, if you come in as an associate and you're being paid $225,000 a year, the expectation is that you're available all the time. Anytime somebody needs you to jump in on something. So it feels like you never get that evening or weekend off or have that vacation feel truly uninterrupted because you're expected to be checking email and being on top of everything. And I find that we're causing a lot of the problems that we're seeing. I mean, there are prisoners of war that are kept awake and not allowed to sleep a full night because it's a strategy, right? So we're causing mental health issues by not letting our associates sleep ever. And it's true that sometimes there's a true emergency. There are actual emergencies in law, and everybody should be prepared to roll up their sleeves and help their clients. But there are also a lot of fire drills and a lot of non-emergency work that has to be done late at night or on weekends that really could wait. And so the idea of having a more sustainable practice is, you know, the smaller and mid-sized firms are generally charging lower hourly rates. So the expectations that their clients have are a little bit different. If you call me at 7 o'clock at night and I'm charging you $2,000 an hour and you say, you know, Jen, I have this worry about something. Can we look at the case law in, you know, Tennessee on this very small issue that probably doesn't really affect the case that we're working on and discuss it? And if I'm charging you $2,000 an hour, I'm worried that the thing that I can offer is a high degree of service. So I say something like, oh my gosh, yes, I'll get the whole team together and we'll stay up all night until we figure out everything we can know about Tennessee law on this issue, and we'll call you first thing in the morning with an answer. But if I'm at a firm that's charging $800 an hour for my time, it's possible that I say, oh gosh, that's a really interesting question. You know, I was just on my way out, but you know what? First thing in the morning, I'll get the team together and we'll talk about the best strategy forward. And we'll let you know what we think we should do, and we'll handle it for you. Okay. Great. You have a good night too. And so it's a little bit easier to be an associate at that smaller mid-sized firm that doesn't expect me to work all night anytime a client is curious about something. It's different
Mhm.
if we have a trial that starts tomorrow or we have a deal that has to sign and something goes wrong at the last minute. There are real emergencies, but that case that I just mentioned where a client might be curious about something isn't really an emergency. And, you know, the way forward for some associates who want to feel like they might have some downtime, might have some time to be with friends and family or pursue other interests is, you know, being at a firm that has that kind of expectation. But another way forward is to be bringing in their own clients, because that way they're bringing in two forms of revenue. They're bringing in the revenue of having clients that have work that can be assigned to other people at the firm, and the work that they can bill and collect on. So at some point they become very valuable for two things, and people are going to be less concerned about, you know, the total number of hours they're billing, and that gives them a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, you made some really great points, and um, One is the higher billable hour is tied to such high expectations that can be very impossible to manage. Um, I've had friends that worked at some large law firms who were expected to have suits and bags in their office so that if during the day something came up, they would jump on a plane and go to the client. And it was no questions asked. You were just expected to do it. Um, Lauren and I recently attended a dinner with Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers, which I'm sure, Jennifer, you're aware of. And it's such a wonderful organization, nonprofit in many states. And they really do focus on this very important topic. And, it's such a great resource because I don't know if people in other industries do realize there is a very, very high dependency rate and depression rate within law firms. And it actually is a topic that is now being discussed about the staff also. So in the past, they would talk about attorneys, but now they're also noting the impact of everyone at the law firm because it's a trickle effect. So it's such a great point, and it is, unsustainable.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine. I guess I never thought about the staff, but you're right, because if I'm working on last minute changes to a brief at 2 in the morning, there's probably somebody alongside me helping with that. Or if I'm, working on putting together signature pages or due diligence or getting an agreement ready to sign, there are other people involved. And I think it's wonderful that they're working with the staff too. With the lawyers, I see that they have very little time to relax. So, when you get home from work at midnight and you have to be back at 7 the next morning, it becomes easy to pour a drink and it takes 5 minutes to feel relaxed instead of doing something that's probably healthier, like yoga or meditation or talking it out with someone or reading a book, because it might take you a little bit longer to relax and it will eat into the time you have to sleep. But that one drink becomes 2 or 3 or more drinks. And then it becomes a little bit harder to wake up in the morning. And that pot of coffee sometimes becomes something else. And they get caught in a cycle. I hear about a lot of lawyers abusing Adderall because they have to focus for so many hours on such detail-oriented work that's a little bit repetitive, and they have to be able to use superhuman efforts that we really shouldn't expect from people. And I think some of the law firms must know that this is going on, and either they feel like they don't know the solution or they don't really care as much as we do about it.
No, I mean, it's true. Even at the Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers dinner, they were saying, I believe it was something like 40% of attorneys in Massachusetts self-reported an unhealthy relationship with drugs and alcohol. That's just the people that are self-reporting. It's a real concern, and it's a concern that the entire industry needs to start taking more seriously and really taking a look at this profession and how you can make it more sustainable for people, which really sort of lends to the idea of that work-life balance and how that really does become important. So Jen, could you speak a little bit about how your small and mid-sized firms can realistically offer a better work-life balance compared to a lot of the larger firms out there?
Sure. Well, just the idea of being able to not work all night every time a client has a question is nice. It is very nice also to encourage lawyers who are finished with whatever emergency is going on to leave. Like I worked at firms where there were times that we had to work until 4 in the morning and get something finished and whatever. And they would say, now go home and rest because, it doesn't, you've put in your effort. And just the idea of giving them more responsible work that develops their skill set as a lawyer. A lot of lawyers at least feel like they don't mind working very hard if it's something that they care about a lot and they're really learning and they're helping a client. So at least showing them where their work fits into what you're doing on the larger deal or the larger litigation, and giving a lot of feedback is very important. A lot of times people, work on a 500-page document and they stay at the office late many nights in a row, and they finally get it done and they're so proud and they hand it in, and they just get dinged for, on page 97 there's a comma missing, but they don't hear thank you so much for your hard work. Overall, this project was excellent. I just want to point out that on page 97, we need a comma here because without it, the meaning of this sentence is ambiguous, and that's why we need it. Not, just making up a rule that they didn't follow. And I talk about this a lot. A lot of lawyers were straight A students all the way through school and college and law school. They're used to getting a gold star. If they get an A minus, they're used to pulling an all-nighter and working even harder and getting 100 the next time. And here they're working as hard as they possibly can, but sometimes it feels like they're not set up to succeed. And so giving them some feedback, giving them the good feedback when you have it, and instead of yelling, telling them what they could improve upon for next time, because they really want an A, they want a gold star. And if you give them a path forward, that would be very helpful. A lot of lawyers complain that they get no feedback until a yearly review that is either sort of, very high level and they don't know what they can do differently, or doesn't happen at all sometimes. And establishing mentors for lawyers is such a wonderful thing that smaller and mid-sized firms could take advantage of. A lot of associates who are polled, there are various organizations, would love to have more feedback and would love to understand the way the law firm works, understand how they might succeed, how they might become a partner in the law firm, how they might do better with their business development or their, lawyering skills, and assigning mentors and actually having them do things with the lawyers instead of like, hey, Lauren's your mentor, but you haven't spoken to her in 2 years. But, we have some activities set up for you and your mentor. There's a meeting schedule or something like that goes very far.
That's such a good point. We've worked with firms, and I've worked in a firm that actually did successfully implement mentor programs. And one of the keys to that is having the mentor understand what's expected of them and what their role is and what falls under mentorship and what falls under other, like perhaps firm management categories. But mentors, it's such a great tool, and it helps set the new hire up at success, and it helps the firm retain that individual. So that's such excellent advice, Jennifer.
And I think that's for when we're starting associates right out of law school, but also could be equally for lateral hires, whether it's an associate or a partner. And when you're hiring laterally, having an onboarding and integration plan is also very important. Onboarding means the first day is very smooth and you've made all of your arrangements ahead of time. And I'm sure that your company helps a lot with that. Some of the firms that I speak to have a lot of aspirations for integration in that first year, but sometimes the staffing is stretched a little thin and they're not really able to do all of the things that they've planned. I think that it's so important. It may be worthwhile pulling people off of other responsibilities to make sure that they're checking in with that lateral hire during the whole first year and making sure that whatever they've promised has happened and whatever they need is available so that they can succeed. Because, sometimes those lateral hires leave quickly when they feel like they've been misled in some way.
Yeah, you've hit on something that's actually, it happens often actually, where the onboarding does fall short, and it's not because people don't care. It's because the resources are so thin with a firm that are doing the onboarding. And, people remember their first impression. They say this, and I think it's accurate. They really remember their first day. You remember the beginning and the end of an experience. And, firms put so much time into finding that candidate. So it's such a shame when it falls short after the hire takes place.
When you're not thinking about the fact, well, resources are tight. That's not why I'm getting a better onboarding. You're just, the impression that you're getting is that the firm's not really invested in you. They don't care that much. They can't be bothered, right? Unfortunately, it does develop a negative impression of the firm as a whole, and it's really hard to undo those initial impressions.
I agree with you. I think that, firms need to plan ahead of time for that first day. Onboarding should be a seamless process. When you get to the firm, you should have an office and a computer and a telephone number and, whatever training you need for your computer set up. And you should have a bio on the website, and there should be a lunch or a meeting or something set up for you so you can meet others and feel part of the firm right away. And I do find that a lot of small and mid-sized firms are doing a great job with that.
Yes.
But it's a little bit harder to follow through on that whole first year when resources are short. But I think that there's a lot of bang for your buck on following through a whole year of integration. If you're bringing in, an associate who wants to be working in a certain area, checking in with them, making sure you make the right introductions when you're bringing in, a rainmaker partner who's been promised a lot of cross-selling and cross-marketing resources, making sure you make those introductions and set up those meetings so that they are able to market with their other partners. I mean, there are a lot of different things that can be done. And, a smaller mid-sized firm has the advantage of maybe some more flexibility because there are fewer layers to go through. So one of the things that small and mid-sized firms can offer is the ability to let people who are new at business development bring in some smaller matters at the beginning. If you're at a top 15 firm and you normally represent Blackstone and KKR and IBM and Microsoft, it's hard to let somebody bring in, a deal with a local business in town. But if you're at a smaller mid-sized firm, it may be worthwhile as management to let your associates or your service partners who are trying business development for the first time bring in some things and have some flexibility on the rates or on the size of the deal or the litigation for those first few things so that they can get their feet under them and become better business developers, because that's how you train your future rainmakers and take some of the pressure off of the small number of rainmakers you may have now.
Yeah, thank you. Jennifer, you also have talked about the 6 pillars to becoming a happy rainmaker. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, I would love to. It's my passion project. I always, our motto is because successful lawyers should be happy too. And I had always thought about a lot of these ideas, but it took me having to take some time off because I had RSV for a week. I couldn't work. And I finally watched Hallmark Christmas movies and read fun novels instead of business development books. And when my brain got a rest, I got a little more creative and came up with a framework to explain what I had been advising lawyers and law firms all along. So the first pillar is care for yourself, because as we say, you have to be alive to do the other pillars. So it's all about thinking of yourself as an elite athlete. You're giving high level advice and counsel to your clients. And in order to do that, you have to have some sleep, some healthy food, some movement, some, well visits with your doctor, some things. And we offer a lot of ways to spend just 6 minutes at a time trying those things out, like taking the elevator to the floor below you and climbing a flight of stairs, or ordering one healthy meal this week when you're getting takeout, or things like that you can get started with so it's not overwhelming. The second pillar is build business, because having your own clients gives you the leverage and power over your own career to be able to have some balance. Once you have your own clients, you're the one who decides what time the conference call is, or who has to attend, or what the deadline is. And it doesn't have to be during your son's Little League game. It can be some other time when it's more convenient for you. So that's a really important thing. And we talk about everything in point one increments because we know lawyers have to bill a lot of time and they're always very busy in between when you're waiting for a partner to give comments on your brief or you're waiting for a client's feedback on something. And instead of surfing the web, you can do one of these things. And then we talk about setting boundaries and planning intentionally, setting that boundary about how you need at least 4 hours of sleep a night to be functional and you're sorry, but it's time to leave. Setting that boundary about how when you're on vacation, you only check email once a day, or, when on Thursdays, I have to leave at 5 o'clock because I coach Little League. I'll be back on at 8 o'clock, and you can reach me on my cell phone if anything happens in the interim. Planning intentionally, taking your calendar out and looking at the whole year ahead. It's hard to plan a 2-week vacation for next Monday, but you could plan a 2-week vacation for 6 or 8 months from now. It's all those business development activities need to be planned in. If you join a great networking group, but you never make it to the meetings, it doesn't really help you. So if you put all the meetings on your calendar now and all the checkups with your doctor and all the times you're going to try and take a walk or get a workout in, all of the things can be planned ahead of time and then look at it a month ahead, the Sunday night before the week. And sometimes you may have to rearrange some things. And we talk about learning continuously so that you can be very useful to your clients, but also so that you can pivot to something that's really useful to you. So if something in your practice area is not going forward as well, you can maybe pivot to working with different clients or a slightly different type of deal. Use your CLE wisely, get some other training too. And then the last one is creating a legacy. What do you want to be known for now? But what do you want to retire to? We see a lot of lawyers who are still working at 87 because their third wife left them, their kids don't talk to them, they never had any hobbies, and their friends stopped calling because they always said no. So we want to create lawyers that have a full and happy life and look forward to something in retirement, whether it's getting away from law entirely and going on a round the world cruise, or teaching a class or writing a book or becoming a mentor or continuing to refer clients to the firm after they stop working full time. There's something they need to be excited for.
That's amazing, Jennifer. Really, like you just summed up a few very doable takeaways. Like even something that sounds as simple as planning a year in advance is critical because schedules fill up. And then you also touched on what can be a reality for some folks is at the end of the day or the end of your career, or when you're in the next phase of your life and you're starting to wind down in your career, some folks find that perhaps they didn't maintain relationships and now they don't have that anymore. So those pillars are excellent. And thank you for sharing.
I also like that they are approachable because so often, you're trying to get healthier or whatnot, and you'll listen to a podcast or read a book and it's like, you should meditate for an hour every day. And I'm like, well, that'd be great. Who's got time to do that? Right. So even just the idea of take the elevator up, one floor below your destination and then walk up one flight of stairs. Right. I think that when you offer advice like that is approachable, attainable, and doable, you build on those little successes and that can become a habit that really anybody can incorporate into their regular life. So I really appreciate the approach you would take with the 6 pillars.
We tried because we know that a lot of attorneys admit to being perfectionists. There's actually a new study out there that links perfectionism with some of the other mental health issues that lawyers are facing. And, a lot of lawyers don't want to start an exercise program until they can train for the marathon or start any healthy eating until they can eat completely clean food and we talk about how doing just anything at all, it's like compound interest. Those small changes can add up over time and make a bigger difference. And also, most lawyers, fortunately, are earning enough money for their work to be able to get some outside help with some of these things, whether it's getting some help with meal delivery or working out with a trainer or getting a business development coach, something that can help you have a more sustainable career. And actually, having some marketing and business development support is something that a lot of associates are missing at those larger firms. So that might be one other advantage of small and mid-sized firms. If they could help associates from a pretty early stage learn how to make a business case for the resource that they're asking for, learn how to say, I want to go to this conference because I think these people will be there, and I plan to do this, and my follow-up will be that, and what I'm hoping to achieve is X, then firms could invest a little more upfront in their business development and marketing activities, and they could become rainmakers faster.
That makes a lot of sense, right? You have to invest in your people, and you also have to invest in yourself and building a culture and an environment at a firm where those are the priorities. I think at the end of the day, you're building a model that really is set up for sustainability, but also profitability and scalability, which is important, right? Those are things that you've got to take into account. There is the business of law, and that's a lot of times that training, that mindset, that is not what's being conveyed during law school, and a lot of times early on in your career. And then you see these attorneys who are 7, 10, 15 years out, and they're great practitioners, but they don't have a network. They don't have the ability to build a book of business. And it's really hard to start doing that far into your career.
I agree with you, although I would say that it's never too late and anyone can start doing some business development activity. There are introverts that write wonderful articles or speak to clients one-to-one. There are extroverts who love to go to conferences or speak at events, but there's something for everyone. And it's a myth that there are some perfect rainmakers out there and everybody else shouldn't even try. And I hope that anybody who's listening to this that feels like they missed the boat on that thinks about asking for some help from their firm or maybe even seeking some coaching on their own.
Yeah, I like that because I do think sometimes people get discouraged. They reach this point and all of a sudden they do have a little more control over their schedule. They've reached that point in their career and now they sort of turn their eye on business development. And Margaret and I will talk with firms and talk with partners, new equity partners that sort of say, I don't know where to get started. And then a lot of times are afraid to almost get going. And I think what you said is so true. It is never too late to start doing that and putting yourself out there. And there are lots of different opportunities. We all develop business differently. You don't have to, be an extrovert to be able to bring in a lot of business. It's really true.
Yeah. And what we try to talk about with the 6 pillars is it's beneficial for the law firm too. When we started all the mental health and wellness programs after that letter, Big Law killed my husband in 2017, a lot of firms were willing to put money and resources toward making sure that there were no more suicides at their firm. And, they weren't worried about those mental health challenges. But if the market gets a little tight, if profits go down, those are some things that firms might not invest in if they don't see a return. But the care for yourself prong goes right next to the build business. And we think the 6 pillars pushes more junior lawyers to think about relationship building and business development in a way that's really beneficial to the firms they work with too. So it gives them a more balanced look at the business of law. And I think both the lawyer and the law firm can benefit from it.
Yeah. So Jennifer, it's interesting because we're coming close to the end of our time together and we have so many things we wanted to talk to you about, but just to piggyback on the last section where you noted that folks, it's never too late to begin. And you also said something that is so important. There's many different ways for someone to develop business. There's those thought leaders who don't need to be speaking at conferences, but they can spread the word through their sharing of knowledge, which is a form of business development. Could you share more about what firms can do to help associates develop their networks and their business development skills?
Sure. I think that firms should probably be talking about it a little bit more at a much earlier stage. We have lunch and learns all the time about various practice areas and how to have better deposition skills or how to review documents better. Why not have one about choose a business development activity that you'd like to try? I know some of the business development coaches I know are often called in to give a talk at a firm, and sometimes the firms will ask associates and other service professionals, if you're interested in working with that person one to one, let us know. And if you're willing to make the commitment and the effort, we'll pay for some of that business development coaching. Some firms have really great marketing or business development people in-house that could help. But we really do think that point one can make a difference here. So putting something on your calendar every week is like compound interest. It builds up over time. It would be great to do something 52 times a year, to set aside a half hour, even 20 minutes or 5 minutes, if that's all you have, every week to reach out to someone, to put a post on LinkedIn, to come up with an article topic and find somebody to write it with you, to look for a conference you might want to attend, look for a networking group you might want to join. Call a friend from law school who's in-house now and schedule a lunch. There are so many things you can do, but you can't do them all on December 31st for the year. So that's why you have to plan intentionally. You have to get it into your calendar so that if somebody says, are you free at 2:00 on Thursday? You could either say, no, actually, I'm not free until 2:30, or you could move that block of time to a different time on Thursday, but at least you have a reminder on your calendar that you need some business development activity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such great advice. And on the firm level, I think it's important to make it part of the conversation, so it's not it's an expected behavior. So as firms start to, they talk about client cases and other important information, weave that into those weekly meetings so that people know that it is expected at the firm and it's a norm.
Yeah, I think even giving associates a marketing budget of some kind pays off. Most of them will certainly not even reach the maximum that you offer. But if you make it part of the conversation, you have a marketing budget, feel free to take somebody from law school out for lunch. Feel free to go to a networking event using that budget, or talk to us about a conference you're thinking about, or whatever it is. If you make it part of the expectation, a lot of associates will take you up on it. And there
Mhm.
may be some people out there who are never going to do any business development, no matter what kind of enticements there are at the firm. And we have to accept that. But I think there are many more associates and junior partners who would be participating in marketing and business development if they could see the way forward.
I agree. So, I'm so sad because we're actually getting so close to the end of our time together. And like I said, we had a lot of other information we wanted to pick your brain on. But, what we'd love to end with is, so you began the show by sharing some advice that was horrible. Would you mind sharing a little, like, what is the best piece of advice you've received?
Sure. My favorite piece of advice that I often pass on to others is, what other people think of you is none of your business. And I think that helps a lot when you're starting your business development activity for the first time. You're putting that post out there on LinkedIn and you're worried about what people might think when they read it, or you sign up to speak somewhere or to go to a conference for the first time. You need to do things for yourself. Most of the people aren't paying that close attention to you. They're not really judging you for that one LinkedIn post or the one remark you made in a speech you were giving, but not doing it is going to stand in your way.
That's incredible advice and honestly resonates with me personally. It just really is. It's so true. Like not everyone is watching what we're doing. And sometimes you just have to put it out there and you are who you are. So that is excellent advice. And thank you. So that does bring us to the end of the show, Jennifer. Thank you.
I'm sorry that we're at the end. I
I
could
know I
talk
have
to you
to, like,
for a
I
long
keep repeating
time.
it because we had so many things we didn't get to ask you, but perhaps we'll have you on again if you would come
Gonna
back.
need a part two.
I would be very happy to do a part two. And
Okay.
shameless plug, I wrote a business parable about the 6 pillars called The Happy Rainmaker, which is set to come out on January 1st, 2026, and follows our friend Bob Biglaw and his 2 friends from law school, Sam Solo and Susie Smalla. And I hope that it's a quick and interesting explanation of the 6 pillars that lawyers can resonate with.
Yeah, Jennifer, that's awesome. Like, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and ask you, like, how can people learn more about this book? When will they be able to buy it, read it? Like, can you share information?
Sure. So I think you have the link to our website. If you go on our website and click on 6 pillars, you can get all of our information. And we have a YouTube channel with a Happy Rainmakers video series. They're 6-minute videos, so you can get them in between things because point one can make a difference. We also have a resource page for the book and a place where you can order and see some new content called The Happy Rainmaker. So
That's
hopefully that will be helpful to some people, but you can always reach out to me if you have any questions about any of this. I love to talk about it.
great. Thank you. We will put in the notes your contact information, the links you just mentioned, so our listeners will be able to easily find you and these great 6 pillars. So, Jennifer, thank you for sharing your insights with us today. We know that many firm leaders, attorneys, folks listening will leave today's show with some tangible takeaways. And to everyone, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining the Law Firm Lab by MB Law Firm Consulting. If you enjoyed this episode, we would love for you to please rate it, follow, share it with other folks that you think will enjoy the show. And until next time, I'm Margaret Burke, along with my co-host, Lauren Johnson, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.